Hey there, good morning, Bio30s. Today's topic is population growth and population growth curves. So you can read your textbook, and I've got lots of videos up for this week as well, looking at how does a population change? How does it grow? And a growth curve is going to show you the population on the y-axis as opposed to the time on the x-axis. And we might have an open population where there's births and deaths and immigrations and emigrations, like mice in a farmer's field, or it might be a closed population, like our planet is one, right? We're not getting on or off the planet, game preserves, laboratories, there's no migration happening. And any of the population changes are due to the births. And remember that births are also known as the natality. That is just a fancy way of saying birth rate. Natality, let me spell that right. And then the deaths, well, that is the mortality. The death rate is how many are dying in a certain time, typically a year. So looking at most population growth curves, there is kind of 4 phases to a population growth curve, which I've numbered right here. So number 1 is our lag phase. And on the graph, that's, it might be a long lag phase like this, like in a human population, or who knows, depending on what the population is. But it's the time that the animals, the plants, whatever those organisms, their population is getting established, they're getting used to the surroundings. And then typically there's a steep upslope on the graph, and that part, number 2 here, is the exponential growth. And at this point in time, the species is reaching their biotic potential, their maximum population growth rate. Now that's different for every species. This biotic potential is based on intrinsic factors that are like built into a population. How many babies can they have at one time? How many litters of babies every year? And how often are they reproducing once they reach maturity? So if there's nothing limiting this population growth and they can reproduce as much as they want, we're getting this exponential growth. Now, this you would think would keep on going on forever, but it doesn't. It's actually, the curve flattens out, and you can see that it kind of fluctuates up and down like this, but it's not going up like this forever. And it's because of the environmental resistance. Any factor, be it a density dependent or a density independent factor, is going to limit the population growth. And it causes the population curve, it's not J-shaped anymore, going up and up and up like this. It now flattens out and it looks more like an S-shaped curve, kind of like that. And eventually the population is going to level out and reach this carrying capacity. And this carrying capacity, that's the maximum stable population that the environment can hold. So I mean, if the environment changes, then the population's carrying capacity may change as well. So those are the basic parts of a population growth curve. And as I mentioned, the biotic potential is a really important thing that is different for every species. And it's based on a bunch of factors. Like I mentioned, how many times can an individual reproduce in a year? What's the birth rate? How old are you until you can have babies? So like, for instance, I read somewhere that an elephant can't have offspring till it's 30 years old. So its age of reproductive maturity is very high. You compare that to a fruit fly that, within a couple of days of being born is already reproducing. So this biotic potential explains why a population can grow quickly or not so quickly. Elephant populations aren't going to grow as quickly as a population of fruit flies. So this is the maximum population growth rate. Any species that have a high biotic potential can produce more offspring. They can reproduce earlier in life, and they can do it many times in a year. So they have a high population growth rate. So like I said, fruit flies, rabbits, bacteria. And so the biotic potential determines this population growth rate. And we're going to learn some new terms here. Our selected population grows at its population biotic potential. And so we call that exponential growth, as opposed to something like an elephant or a human being. Well, they're having less offsprings, less times a year. And so as a result, they're going to have a lower population growth rate. So, environmental resistance, as I mentioned just earlier in the video, you probably didn't know what I was saying, but density dependent factors, as the density of the population goes up because now there's more waste building up, there's more predators, starvation. These are living things that is going to reduce the population growth. So remember, the environmental resistance is what's changing a graph from a J-shaped curve. Won't allow that population to keep increasing forever. It makes it level out and reach a steady carrying capacity. So again, those environmental resistance factors can be density dependent or density independent. They can be abiotic, non-living things like harsh weather or a drought or a flood that is stopping the population from growing exponentially, from meeting its biotic potential. So here's these two types of growth curves. We see that we have kind of an S-shaped curve. So that looks like the letter S there. And this is an S-shaped or logistic curve, whereas this one looks kind of like a J like this. So we call this one a J-shaped or exponential growth curve. And this one may have a death phase where you might see a whole bunch of the organisms dying off. Sometimes that happens in seasonal populations, whereas this one is going to tend to level out and reach its carrying capacity. Now, since it reaches its carrying capacity, these are typically their K-selected populations, the ones that live a long time. They have good parental care, they take care of their babies, and so their infants survive, and they have small litter sizes. The J-shaped ones are going to be called an R-selected species, and so they have this exponential growth. They have lots of babies, large litters, they don't take care of their offspring, so a lot of the offspring may die at an early age, and these species don't live for very long, usually less than a year. Now, I say these are typical. You might find exceptions to these rules, but in general, a K-selected species, like an elephant, is going to have S-shaped, whereas an R-selected, something like a fruit fly, is going to have a J-shaped population curve. Okay, so moving on, what do we expect humans to be? Well, based on that, we don't reproduce till later on in life, and we have typically one offspring at a time, right? Unless there's twins or triplets. But usually we have small litters only once a year, right? And so because we are considered a K-selected species, well, then we should have an S-shaped logistic curve. If you thought that's what you should think, but you'd be wrong. So kind of unexpected, right? Human population growth is actually looks like this. It is J-shaped, it's exponential. And kind of the reasons why we have no predators, I mean, like we do, but I mean, really we can use guns to kill them and stuff like that. We have modern medicines to increase our lifespan, antibiotics, we have modern technology, transportation, not just to help getting place to place, but getting food from place to place. And we may not have even reached our carrying capacity yet of this planet. We don't know, but it is kind of unexpected. We should be S-shaped, but we're not. We're actually a J-shaped population. Okay, so here's this information on the different life strategies. So Mr. Anderson talks about the characteristics of each of these organisms. So like fruit flies would be R-selected, and humans and large mammals, elephants, they'd be K-selected strategists or K-selected populations. Why is that? Because they fit in with these different populations. Now, you got to understand that not every organism fits perfectly into this. And so it's kind of a scale or a continuum where you have some individuals that are very far close to the R-selected scale, some are very close to the K-selected, and some are a mix of both. Like if you can imagine a sea turtle, they have lots of offsprings, they lay lots of eggs, but not all of them are going to survive and make it to maturity, and they don't take care of them, right? There's no parental care. So they do have a large body size and they live for a long time. So you can see some of those things are K-selected and some are R-selected. So you'll often get questions where you have to choose. Here's a list of a bunch of things. Is it going to be an R-selected or a K-selected population? So the Amoeba Sisters has a really good video on ecological relationships, talks about symbiosis and non-symbiotic relationships like predation and competition, and goes through different examples of each. And I've got a bunch of examples for you here as well, so you can read through these notes and watch the videos, learn about the two different types of competition between two different species, interspecific and intraspecific within the same species. And Mr. Anderson talks a fair bit about the life history patterns and the populations, how they fluctuate here. They go up and down. And so you can watch his videos to get a little bit of information on that. And then human population growth is really good information for you on this National Public Radio video. And saying 7 billion, I think we're kind of way past that now, but how did we get so big so fast? Well, we as humans were having a really long lag phase. Our population was not changing very much for the longest time. Here's our lag phase, thousands of years, right? And so it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution when our population really started to take off, and that's the exponential growth that we talk about. And so we had this long lag phase, and now we got to ask, have we reached our biotic potential? Have we reached our maximum population growth rate? Have we reached the carrying capacity of the planet? What happens if we have reached the carrying capacity? Is our population going to start to go down and then up and then down until we finally level out? Well, we don't know that yet. So maybe we've gone past the carrying capacity. Maybe we haven't reached it. Maybe we're about to reach it. Well, we'll look back someday in history and have an answer to that. But why is our population going up? Well, there's a lot of problems with this, right? I talked about we've got all these medications to, prolong our lifespan. And unfortunately, though, we're depleting the planet of natural resources. And there's, as you can see right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. That's certainly going to change our world's population growth. And then we're not very kind to our planet. We do a lot of bad things, destroy habitats for other animals and populations, global climate change, etc. So, lots of things to consider about our human population growth. And the last thing in this booklet is succession. Amoeba Sisters do a really great job going through that, differentiating between primary and secondary succession. You have a few questions to answer on this, and I believe one assignment this week on this material. And I guess that's it. If you have any questions, then you're more than welcome to email me. Otherwise, till then, take care. Talk to you later.